Okay, so Blizzard did it once again. I don't know what they're doing wrong, but they decided to change how Reckless Abandon works. So it no longer gives you Crushing Blow just based on recklessness. It gives you Crushing Blow or two Crushing Blows or two Bloodthirsts or two Bloodbaths after you Rampage. So they changed this, but they forgot to fix a Battle Trance again. So for pretty much the entire expansion in Shadowlands, Battle Trance was bugged. So it would not proc from Crushing Blow, but they eventually fixed it. They eventually made it so it procs off Crushing Blow. It wasn't perfect. Like if you had a Crushing Blow and then your Wreck dropped and you Raging Blowed, it would still not proc it. You'd have to do one or the other twice, which is like, okay, that's fine. At least, you know, it works like with both of them. But now, if let's say I get enough Rage here, so I Rampage and I have Crushing Blow, I Crushing Blow twice, it doesn't proc my Battle Trance. So Crushing Blow does not proc Battle Trance currently. I noticed that pretty much Crushing Blow is up the entirety of the game, so most people are probably going to be running Reckless Abandon in PvP. Maybe people will run Anger Management, maybe some people find it to be better, but I think Reckless Abandon, just with how high the uptime is right now, I think it's really fun the way they did the interaction. But if you're going to be running Reckless Abandon and Battle Trance, it's going to be very difficult to keep Battle Trance up. Pretty much, like, you won't be able to keep it up ever unless you're really, really smart with your Raging Blows. But with how high the uptime is, you're probably not really going to be getting up too often. So a good way to counteract this bug right now is, since they made Reckless Abandon a buff, so now if I get enough rage here, it's a buff now, but you can also cancel this buff. You're able to cancel Reckless Abandon and cast Raging Blow. So what I did for Battle Trance is I made a cancel Reckless Abandon, cast Raging Blow macro, a separate Raging Blow macro. So now if I proc Reckless Abandon, I press this, it will cancel it and it will put up Battle Trance. And I find this to be very useful, especially in like solo content like duels and stuff like that. You gain a lot of value off of getting your heals up and keeping your staying alive or whatever. You don't have to rely on a healer. So this is definitely something to consider, especially if you're running Battle Trance right now. It makes it a lot easier, like especially if you rampage or whatever. You have to rampage to keep your slaughterhouse up, and you're like, okay, well, I have to deal with these two Crushing Blow stacks. It's like, well, I can't get my Battle Trance up, so I can rampage, and then I can just cancel it and get my Battle Trance up anyway. Alright, the next thing has to do with Reckless Abandon as well. So previously, when you're expected to Reckless Abandon and you pop the Recklessness, since it turned into Bloodbath, it would reset the cooldown of Bloodthirst. The same interaction happens when you proc it through the new Reckless Abandon with Rampage. So if you Bloodthirst and Rampage, it'll reset the cooldown of Bloodthirst. Also, if I Bloodbath again, it'll reset it again right after I get the finishing stack. Now this can be very good for using Enrage Regeneration. So I can essentially have a Rampage, I can regen, Bloodthirst, Rampage, regen, Crushing Blow, Bloodthirst, Rampage, regen, Crushing Blow, Bloodthirst. So you can get a lot of Bloodthirst off during this. Now that might not be the best thing to do, but that's like sort of like an in-between of damage and healing. I'm going to show it without that. I'm going to show it just direct healing. Now keep in mind, I'm not running a Bloodthirst build, so I don't have a reduced cooldown Bloodthirst. This is just essentially a baseline Bloodthirst without any spec. So the cooldown is at the very longest. Also, I don't really have the greatest amount of haste, so keep in mind I probably have a longer cooldown than a lot of people for Bloodthirst, but you can definitely make this heal a lot. Okay, so we're gonna try with Recklessness because it's gonna give me more rage to Rampage and reset more Bloodthirst. So I'm just gonna pop Recklessness here. I'm gonna regen Bloodthirst, Rampage, Bloodthirst. I'm just gonna wait for Bloodthirst. It resets. I'm gonna Rampage again. It resets. Wait. Resets and resets again. So that's probably the most amount of bloodthirst you can get off with at least my amount of haste. Alright, so now we're going to try regen with just normal bloodthirst and see how many bloodthirst we can get off during it in comparison to doing a reset that we did. Okay, so it was definitely a lot less, and I got really lucky there. I kept getting enraged procs, so I got more haste, so it was able to reset quicker. That's probably not always going to be the case, unless like if you're spamming bloodthirst, obviously, because it's like a 35% chance or something. I definitely feel like this is something that people should pay attention to if you're playing Fury Warrior. It's probably the only thing that Fury has that can be considered skillful. Now another thing newer Fury Wars don't do is pressing Spell Reflect. So Spell Reflection gives you a 20% magic damage reduction for 5 seconds. So previously, Spell Reflection wouldn't give you, or you would remove the buff after you reflect a spell. Now you'll get this buff, which is just called Spell Reflection, along with your other Spell Reflection buff. And it stays on even after you reflect a spell now. That's a lot of Fury Warriors didn't realize was a change. It's definitely something you should pay attention to, especially because a lot of classes now are very magic based, like Demon Hunters. I mean, pretty much it's just 100% magic. Like, let's say you're in a 1v1, it's mainly used more so in 1v1s this way, because in a lot of 2v2 or 3v3 matches, you might need to save it for mind games, Cyclone, a lot of other things. But in a 1v1, just pressing Spell Reflect as a magic damage reduction, then having War Paint up and D-Stance, that's a lot of damage reduction and rage regeneration. So you have a lot of ways to reduce damage as Fury, unlike Arms. Arms currently only has a nerf D-Stance and parry. But I just wanted to make this video to kind of go through the healing capabilities that Fury has that a lot of people don't know. Bring back more pain. Thank you. Bye.